Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Taglavia. You're listening to Right Side Up, where we discuss local politics and what's happening in your neighborhood. I do have a co-host this week, Nathan Peets. Nathan, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm glad the weather's finally warming up, but now
Yes.
the grass is getting ahead of me.
Yeah, well, my grass has been ahead of me for quite a while. Later on this week, I'm probably going to be catching up. But I know when I have you on the show, I like to have you do a devotional, and this week is no different, so I'm not sure how well prepared you are, but I think, I hope that my audience has enjoyed your devotionals. I know when we do devotionals up in the State House, we do get a pastor or minister occasionally who does a really, really good devotional, so I figured that should be something that we do occasionally on the show. So with that, I will let you take it away.
Well, I can't guarantee it'll be really good, but I at least can read some scripture. Let's start there.
That's great.
So from the epistle of Paul to the church in Galatia, chapter 6, verse 9. Well, I'll start in verse 7. He says, "Do not be deceived, God is not mocked. For whatever one sows, that will he also reap. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, if we do not give up. So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." And just a couple things I'd like to highlight from this. First is to explain when Paul uses flesh and spirit, he's talking about flesh not as a reference to our physical bodies, but he's talking about mankind in our natural fallen state where we're inclined to serve our own interests. And the Spirit refers to the Spirit of God. That if we are living according to the principles of God's kingdom and through the power of His Spirit that He gives to all who trust in Him, we will be sowing and reaping spiritual rewards. But, now is not an easy time for many people. Now is a difficult time. And even for those who are trying to do good, you can grow weary trying to do good, can't you, Mike?
Yes, you can.
I was just encouraging another friend earlier today that what makes and sustains life is people purposely pouring themselves out for the sake of the next generation, for the sake of their children, and then by extension, pouring yourself out for your community.
Yes.
Pouring yourself out for your constituents there in the Capitol, pouring yourself out. It's self-sacrifice, and that's what sustains civilization and nurtures and raises up the next generation, is parents divesting themselves of their own interests and putting their energy and their efforts and their riches into the development of the next generation. So this is not a time to stop doing the good things that God calls us to do,
Right.
but to keep on doing good, that knowing, as He promises, we will reap if we don't lose heart.
Right.
So don't lose heart. Keep on doing
and
that you've been called to do.
And to that point, I talk to people a lot, and I try to encourage them not to give up, to get out, get involved, pay attention, stay informed, inform yourself. Yeah. That's one of the things, at the close of every show, stay informed, stay safe. Yeah. Inform yourself, and in doing so, you're learning things that you can then convey to your friends, your neighbors, your loved ones, that maybe they didn't know. You can have a conversation, and if one of you is involved, you can teach the other, inform the other how to get involved, how to stay involved, and that you can make a difference. People that I know, over the past few years, I've met people who just they really believe, the state is lost. I've heard that I don't know how many times. No, it's not. It's really not. And I've told people I wouldn't be involved in this if I thought it was lost.
Right.
I wouldn't. If I thought it was lost, I would believe it, that I was wasting my time, and I don't believe I'm wasting my time.
No, you're not. I just met someone today who isn't from Vermont but moved to Vermont.
Right.
and this is his chosen home, and he wants to see it succeed.
Right.
So we can't let those who are demoralized demoralize us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And just like I talked about on our last show, how getting out and getting involved, learning, going on, in our case, the Vermont.gov website, looking up your legislator, trying to either leave a message for the sergeant at arms or find the email for your legislator and send them an email, polite, to the point, and you're not guaranteed you're going to get the response that you expect, but you're at least letting them know you're out there. You're out there. And you're at least giving them the idea, like I heard from a friend, if we as a legislature don't hear from our constituents, then we really don't know what any people are thinking. We can know from the result of a vote like we had in November, but it's not just about one day. Like in November, in Vermont, we have a biennium. We have 2 sessions. So it's unfortunately for us now, it's 5 months plus,
Right.
which in my view shouldn't have been 5 months, but that's an argument or a discussion for another day. But it's that whole time period where through this show and speaking with you and my other co-hosts, talking about whether it be national legislation and national issues that apply to Vermont and New Hampshire in the Northeast, or local in Vermont State House or in the New Hampshire State House, things that come up that the electorate and the legislature find the reason or the need to talk about. You and I, before we went to start recording, what do we got coming up now? We've got June 15th, we've got Father's Day coming up.
Yeah.
And in the legislature in Vermont, we have had, it was dubbed the Kids Code bill. I cannot remember the number of the bill. It was a House bill, I believe. But it deals with trying to hold social media companies and social media outlets that target young people, underage people, and what it has done to them with whether it be their anxiety levels or what have you. Mm-hmm. And then we are in right now process the no cell phones in school bill, which makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. But if you take the family and you put the family first, whether it be in public schools or whatever, if mom and dad and grandma and grandpa are paramount, even though we're sending our kids off to, in most cases, public schools, if mom and dad are still paramount in the equation, I think that's what starts to turn us around faster. We've seen so many instances where mom and dad have been shoved to the side, mm-hmm. and where there are actually states who've tried to impose themselves on mom and dad and put themselves, the state put itself above mom and dad. Now, I think when we stop that, we start to change a lot of hearts and minds, and our kids actually start learning more, and their outlook on life is better. So I don't know. I'm sure you have a little bit of input there too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Father's Day, it's an important time to reflect on what has been bequeathed to us, right? So our own fathers, as we all can say honestly, have been a means of blessing to us, even while they haven't been the perfect father, let's say.
Right.
You can choose to fixate on wrongs and sour your entire outlook.
Right.
This is the time for us to focus upon how we have been benefited, how we have been blessed, how our fathers have sacrificed their own lives for us. A sure sign of a dying society is ingratitude.
Okay.
So choose, as Father's Day approaches, to meditate and even seek out things perhaps you haven't thought about before that your father did for you, or how his life was changed and he sacrificed himself for you, Again, back to the earlier point, if we wish to see America have a brighter future, if we wish to see our communities thrive once again, children in our schools to be doing better, we have to focus on what's good and seek to expand that, celebrate the good, honor those to whom honor is due. This is one of the first commandments that's given. Children, honor or obey your parents. And in fact, it's the first commandment that God gave with a temporal blessing attached to it, that if you do this, you will dwell long in the land. And we can see all around us, all of those whose etched on their face is this attitude of ingratitude. Mm-hmm. I guarantee you, Mike, they're not happier for it. Ingratitude has blessed nobody. But you can, if you give careful thought to it, I think gain a great blessing as Father's Day approaches by reflecting on that both personally and then all of us collectively. Previous generations, how have our fathers in generations past been a source of blessing to us? What do we have to be thankful for that wasn't true, let's say, during the Depression era, right? During the different times past in American history, even just there, much less generations before that. But there's so much that we can reflect on and say, you know what, I'm very thankful that my forebears did this, that my own father did this. And it really will color your outlook. And you realize just how much better off you are for all those generations that came before and what they've done. That doesn't mean everything they did was good and everything that's come to you has been good. I'm not talking about that.
Right.
But we could all, depress ourselves if we only focused on negative things. And that isn't going to bless the next generation, I guarantee you.
No. And we see a lot of that in in most of the mainstream media. And the thing that bothers me most with respect to, the stressing of what's supposedly wrong or what's bad is what the climate alarmists are doing to our young people, mm-hmm. how they're really sapping their hope mm-hmm. and giving them, taking away their ambition to actually want to do something and be something in their lives, because they have this attitude. And I've talked to young people who have finally gotten out of high school and either gone to college or went into a trade or gone to do something in business, and they come to realize, and they have a lot of them come to realize, because they've gone out and done their own research, they've been lied to. Mm-hmm. That, the world is not going to come to an end like they've been promised. And I keep bringing up the idea that we need to hold the people who keep saying that the world is coming to an end and that there's going to be no future, that none of these people are going to be putting out any kind of letter of apology to all the young people they scared the living hell out of. Mm-mm. So the young people, I'm hoping, will remember who lied to them and remember what the lie was, so they can go and do their own research and find out who was actually telling them the truth, or find the truth out themselves. There are plenty of outlets where you can find it, so that you can not count on somebody else to give you a good outlook, count on yourself to give you a good outlook.
Yeah, and here's a good measure for weighing something you're being fed. Does it make you feel guilty for existing? Or does it say that life is good and worth living?
Right. So.
Right. Does it give you a vision and a hope for the future? Or is it only projecting a fearful prospect to demoralize you?
Right.
Because the intention of messaging can be seen in its effect.
Right. We're going to need to continue this after this short break because we've come to the end of our first segment. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Right Side Up. We'll be back in a couple.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
John Henry.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Taglavia. You're listening to Right Side Up. My co-host this week is Nathan Peets. Nathan and I were talking about Father's Day and the influence of the family and how we both believe, and probably most of our listeners believe, that we get the family as being paramount in the lives of our kids, especially with respect to our school-age children. I think we start to take back the society that would seem to be losing. I don't think it's lost. I think we can regain it, but we need to be doing it yesterday. So, but we off air, we were talking about your situation and how Father's Day, a lot of changed with you. So why don't you take it away?
All right. Well, I'm the middle child of 5 boys. I'm the third of 5.
Okay.
But I married first.
Okay.
Long story. And I wasn't super young either. I was 25.
Okay.
But on Father's Day in 2008, my oldest was born.
Okay.
And it was funny because my wife was thinking to herself, oh no, I'm not going to be able to give Nathan his Father's Day present because we're going to the hospital. And then she realized, oh, wait, Nathan will be just fine. This is his present. But the neat story here is that my oldest daughter was born on Father's Day, and she was my dad's first grandchild and my grandfather's first great-grandchild.
Right.
So I was pretty ecstatic when I realized that. This is pretty
A lot of firsts on that day.
epical day here in Pete's family history because I went up a rung.
Right.
My dad went up a rung, and my granddad went up a rung. So I called my dad. This is funny. This has just occurred to me. I called my grandpa, too.
Okay.
My grandma and grandpa, they were out on the coast in California touring some lighthouse or something.
Right.
And so I called my grandfather to tell him that he was now a great-grandfather. And he said something very brief and then said, here's your grandmother. So any of you have, grandfathers from, who were born in the 30s or before, you know what those men were like. They didn't necessarily talk much about personal matters.
No, right.
But nevertheless, on Father's Day in 2008, he became a great-grandfather. My dad became a grandfather, and I became a father. And now, this next Sunday, my oldest turns 17.
Wow.
And the day before that, she will receive her high school diploma. She skipped a year. So she's like her mother, she's not sitting still for anything. She's a real go-getter. And she had skipped 8th grade because most of her friends were a year ahead.
Oh, okay.
They were her natural peers, and she just wasn't being challenged in school. So we said, go for it. And I couldn't convince her to stay home and work a year to save up. She wanted to go to college.
Right.
But that's for reasons I won't discuss over the radio.
Right.
She has some motivations to go to college. But everything on the home front's good. She's not running away from a bad situation, but she wants to go and continue to grow and develop as a young lady, and
Right.
she makes me proud.
Good.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
Nice story. Nice story. And I want to try to emphasize family because serving in the legislature, I see so many lawmakers and bills introduced that try to get between parents and their kids. And it really is very bothersome to me. So when I see people pushing back, I see legislation that pushes back and tries to encourage the family and mom and dad being more involved. And I believe, like the self-free schools bill, it is a step in the right direction. Because if we can get the schools to do this, and there have been schools have done it, and they've shown very good results, really good results with the kids' attitudes, with their grades, their study habits, the kids actually interacting with each other and totally unrelated to their phones. They're actually speaking, looking at each other, having social interaction,
right.
not electronically, just face to face, which is really good. I think it's a really positive step, and it's also essential for their development and their skills in the future. Whether they're going to be working for someone or they're going to be have the entrepreneurial spirit and try to have their own business, they're going to need to be able to work face to face with people. So every time I get a chance to promote family, I do.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to have you here to do your devotional and talk about family and stuff like that.
I'm glad to. It's my privilege. Thanks.
But I wanted to move on. Ladies and gentlemen, on this show, we talk about energy a lot in the Vermont legislature. It is a topic. It's a hotly debated topic. Sometimes the bills are put on the wall because either they make too much sense or there is not the right majority to push through an agenda. But energy is a big deal in the state of Vermont. So I wanted to cover this, and it's an article from Substack. I talk about Substack a lot with my audience. I get a lot of material there. There's a lot of great authors. And this is from Energy Security and Freedom, Thomas J. Shepstone. The title is Another Day, Another Realization We Cannot Dismiss Coal, and It May Even Be a Bridge Fuel. We have for some time now been pointing out that coal cannot be dismissed as a means of making electricity in a world where data centers are the new thing and reliable power is even more critical. Natural gas is cheap and clean but cannot be stored. Nuclear is very clean. The uranium can be stored but is expensive. Coal is cheap, not as clean as we'd like, but easy to store. Put them all together and we have a reliable grid and energy security. We need all three. And folks are starting to notice, especially as the energy transition, in quotes, energy transition, continues to unwind. And we see that with the blackout. Nathan, I don't know if you were with me when I did that. I think Dylan was, when we talked about the blackout in Spain. It actually was the Iberian Peninsula, and it was I think there was a total of 40 million people affected. And
I saw it in the news, for sure.
12 to 14 hours without any electricity, and it was because of inverters and apparently the inherent problem with inverters with our current grid and how inverters, when they sense a problem, they turn off. Well, it created apparently a chain reaction with other forms of energy generation, like from coal and nuclear or whatever. They're driving generators, they're driving turbines, which don't automatically shut off. They slowly come to a stop. So we have the ability to notice problems and adjust to them before there are brownouts and blackouts. And in a state where we live, where it gets cold for possibly 4 to 5 months a year, blackouts and brownouts are really not a good thing, especially if we have a legislature that's trying to force us to only have one option for electricity, or electricity as our only form of energy. So let me get back to this article. A new post at Real Clear Energy, the second in a week or so, makes the case for coal, this time as a bridge fuel, the moniker often assigned to natural gas before it became clear it needed to be much more than that. Here's a consolidated version of the story, written by Bernard L. Weinstein from the McGuire Energy Institute at Southern Methodist University. The North American Energy Reliability Corporation, NERC, Summer Reliability Assessment published on May 18th cited the 15-state Mid-Continent Independent System Operator, MISO, as the regional grid most likely to see a meltdown this summer. NERC's warning proved to be prescient. On May 25, more than 100,000 customers in and around New Orleans lost power for most of the day when electricity demand exceeded supply. Despite an emergency order from the Department of Energy several days earlier to keep 1,560 megawatt coal plant in Michigan online that was slated for closure by the end of May. So here we have coal that could have been a backup that wasn't used as backup, and it caused serious blackouts. ERCOT, the Texas grid operator, has also warned of possible outages this summer due to potential solar and wind energy availability during peak demand. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've said it more than once on air. I'll say it again. I use solar, batteries, and generator. I live completely off grid. I don't do it because I believe I'm saving the world. I do it for the independence. And the reason I say that is because I have 3 forms of backup. You need redundancy in a grid for safety. If we are concerned about our citizens as legislators, as I am now, then we must be thinking of having and preventing brownouts and blackouts, especially in the cold winter months in the Northeast that we have here. So this is why I keep bringing up the energy, and I'm going to continue to do so to try to keep banging the pots and pans to rally the troops.
Well, I think you mentioned something that kind of highlights an underlying basic difference between those who are trying to demand that we're all forced into only one type of energy and those who are seeking to ensure energy security, right? We talk about food security.
Yes, but we can have it both ways.
Why don't we talk about energy security? You know, who are those who would be most affected? It's not the wealthy.
Yes.
It's going to be the poor people who are being just squeezed out by the cost of living because of these policies.
You're right.
We could have much cheaper and more secure energy for the working class, for the struggling families.
And we're seeing that in Europe, where some
Right.
of these low emission zones now are being scrapped because, like you said, the people who can least afford it are being hurt the most by it.
But so this is the irony. They advance these under the banner that this is a moral good, right? But it hasn't been proven.
No.
And not only that, they're actually causing moral harm.
Yes.
They're forcing a hardship against the will of these people.
Yeah,
and they're supposed to be their representatives. I can hardly think of anything more ironic.
Well, like you said, forcing a hardship. We have that forced hardship upon us here in Vermont, as in the clean heat standard, which we were supposed to. It was very important until the election, and we got so many seats flipped that all of a sudden it wasn't important and it was never voted on. It was supposed to be voted on in mid-January, and it wasn't. Clean heat standard was, and it still, in my view, needs to be voted down so that whole thing can be scrapped. Act 18 needs to be scrapped. But it imposes price at tax increases or fees on energy, on petroleum-based energy.
Mm-hmm.
And who's it going to hurt the most? The people who can least afford it. The Global Warming Solutions Act, what does it do? It imposes these mandates as far as quote-unquote greenhouse gas emissions that are, in my view, unattainable. You want to have them as goals? Fine. Let's revisit the Global Warming Solutions Act and have them set as goals and take away the mandate part. Because if we want to grow the economy in Vermont, then we need to grow it using all the possible available energy products that we have,
Yeah.
so that we're not bankrupting Vermonters who can least afford it. And that unfortunately is what we're doing. We're driving people to expend their savings and then finally decide they want to move. And I'm one of the reasons I keep harping on the energy is because If we get some legislation changed in this state, we can turn that around and make it so that Vermonters who want to stay here and live their lives out here can.
So this actually, I think, ties into Father's Day in a sense, in that your attitude is you wish to serve the interests and provide for the well-being of those you represent.
That's
right.
That's the oath I swore.
To protect them from being subjected to self-interested influencers in legislation, right?
Right. I mean,
so
I don't have the votes.
You're trying to be a father who's a barrier between constituents who would be harmed by this, right, and those who would serve to gain by allowing this to be forced through.
Right.
But I wanted to give a little framing help.
Maybe
as
you
far
should
as
frame
this,
it after.
This isn't about truth so much as morality.
Okay,
all right.
We're gonna need to go into this in the next segment. Believe it or not, we've burned through another segment already,
right.
Nathan. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will continue this discussion in a couple of minutes. You're listening to Right Side Up.
Take this hammer, carry it to the captain, tell him why I'm gone.
Not everyone can get up every day and look for ways to piss people off. But here at GraniteRock.com, we do that almost every day. I can't tell you how many times someone's lost their SHIT and threatened to end us. But we're still here, pissing people off. It's almost like we enjoy it. And we've been doing it since 2006. That's almost 2 decades of news, politics, and opinion, and now podcasts, and we're just getting started. We believe in principles before parties and politicians. We defend free markets and individual liberty, and if that makes you mad, it makes us smile. We're like Grandma after she stopped caring what other people thought. If that sounds refreshing, you need to check us out. This is Steve McDonald for Granite Rock, and we'll keep shining the light on them for you.
You killed John Henry.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Right Side Up. My name is Mike Taglavia. My co-host this week is Nathan Peets. Before we get back into our discussion, I just want to remind our listeners, if for some reason you cannot listen to us on WNTK Radio, you can go to WNTK.com, click on the podcast button, scroll down to Right Side Up, and you can listen to any number of our shows. If you'd like, you can listen to us on Podbean. You can find us on GraniteGrock.com as well. You can find us on 802 Scoop Facebook, and you can also find us on 802 Scoop YouTube. I think I've covered all of them. Oh, by the way, if you'd like to drop us an email, rightsideUpradio@gmail.com. So I think I've covered it all now. Nathan, you had a quote that you wanted to read before we went to break. So why don't you go ahead and read it?
Well, I was trying to draw in this legislative point you were making about energy.
Right.
And, the clean heat standard, which has now been kind of stalled because they don't have the votes to get it through, and they don't want it to fail. They don't want to bring it up to a vote.
Well, it's pretty much according to the PUC, and I always forget the name of the acronym, but they have pretty much shelved the clean heat standard because the legislature has not voted on what kind of direction they need to go on. So I think it's in limbo. It's really not dead.
Okay.
So,
well, the point I was trying to make about resisting these government mandated, sources of energy and excluding others is that it limits the options, and it makes people vulnerable in case whatever the source of energy du jour is that's approved. What if that doesn't work and all of a sudden people can't heat their homes?
Right.
Or all of a sudden, if that's the only source and everyone's trying to go that one way and the rates skyrocket, people have no recourse because everything else has been outlawed or not been brought in.
Right.
That in essence, what's being done is immoral because it forces people against their will into a vulnerable position.
Yes.
And creates economic hardship, again, against their will.
Yeah.
For the sake of purportedly, but what has not been demonstrated to actually be a moral cause.
Okay.
And I think one of the points that needs to be made is that this is actually not moral, and it's not really well intentioned, because if you can't show that this actually will be beneficial, then you don't know it will be beneficial.
Well, and we've
you
seen,
shouldn't force it upon someone if you don't know that it actually is going to be for their good.
well, the further along this goes, and the more longer this is drawn out, the more we're seeing it's not really truly beneficial.
Right.
And we also need to take into account, and I intend to keep this in the forefront with respect to carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is not a greenhouse gas. It's a plant nutrient, and that one point needs to be hammered home until the average listener, not just to this show, but any other show that they may listen to on a podcast, when somebody starts talking about greenhouse gas, then the listener needs to know in their mind already, this is not a greenhouse gas. It's been shown not to be a greenhouse gas. It doesn't have anything to do with warming, and the warming actually comes before the CO2 increase.
Right.
So go ahead with your quote.
So I think one of the points of attack doesn't necessarily need to be statistical analysis or projections, because those type of arguments don't seem to land as much as a moral argument would.
Okay.
That
okay.
It's the primary job of the legislature to provide, to serve the interests of those they represent.
Yeah.
Right.
And actually not harm their voters
Right.
and
Not
their
harm
citizens.
them and allow them to flourish. Right.
Yeah.
So Thomas Sowell says something about, talking about facts and data versus morals. When he says, it is usually futile to try to talk facts and analysis to people who are enjoying a sense of moral superiority in their ignorance. They don't wish to know anything because they believe they already have the moral high ground. I think it needs to be questioned whether this is actually the moral high ground. I think that's a really point of vulnerable,
Okay.
a vulnerable point to press into, is that this actually is immoral. It's not moral.
Right. Well, it's at the rate it's driving people's savings to zero,
Yep.
and causing people to decide they can no longer live in a state where they may have. This may be the only state they know to call home. So I would tend to agree with you there. But there's this energy thing with respect to this show. This show is going to constantly bring up the energy issue, because the energy issue is one of the main factors in the economy that's going to lead people to whether to decide to stay and fight, stay informed, listen to shows like this because they love the state they live in and they want to stay. So the energy discussion is going to be had on this show on Right Side Up, probably on a weekly basis. So I want to get quickly back into this article, because we're burning through this show very quickly here. The strains on America's power grids are easy to explain. After remaining relatively flat for a decade, electricity demand is now projected to jump 50% over the next 10 years. Investments in server farms, artificial intelligence, crypto mining, and a revival of manufacturing activity account for most of this growth. For example, a recent study by the Berkeley National Laboratory found that data centers consume 4% of total U.S. electricity in 2023, but will account for 12% of power demand by 2028.
Oh, my goodness.
So I brought it up, I believe, last show, talking about modular nuclear. Modular nuclear has been shown to be safe. There is very little nuclear waste. It takes a very small footprint. It doesn't need the water for cooling as much or at all like the older style nuclear reactors. So if we were to have one or maybe two of these modular nuclear reactors in the state of Vermont, what would that do to our energy needs? How much cheaper would our electricity be, and would it free up for people to purchase oil, natural gas, wood pellets, firewood, whatever, wood chips, to use for their heating fuel so that we could have a number of options, and those options would provide for our safety and security in the coldest of the winter months that we have here
Right.
in Vermont. So I think it's a win-win if we have multiple options like we do in most of the rest of our lives, right? In our cars, in our homes, the type of lighting, the type of, do we have air conditioning? Do we have power windows, moonroof, all kinds of things, heated seats, air-conditioned seats in our cars? Why not have these options
Right.
in the rest of our lives? If you want, and we've talked about this, Nathan, if you want to buy an EV or a hybrid, you're welcome to it as far as I'm concerned. Buy 2, buy 3. But I believe the state should not be dictating to us what type of vehicle we must buy. And, the governor did put an executive order out pushing off 1 year the EV standards for this state, which will help a little. But there are some manufacturers that still, I'm hearing, won't be sending some of their most popular vehicles to this state because there's still a law. It won't be enforced, but there's still a law. So we have these unintended consequences that our legislature has imposed upon us that's not making our lives more convenient and more affordable. So we need to do that, like you said, for the safety and security of our citizens, of our residents. Then that needs to be top priority for us. Not trying to make such a minute influence in the temperature, or the so-called increase of the temperature of the world.
Right. If the energy sector of their desire were illustrated by a supermarket, you go to the supermarket and buy the one state-approved grocery that you could buy.
Right.
There's no choice. You just go to the store to get it. But it's
all
all just, all the shelves are lined with the single state-approved product. That's what they want for the energy sector.
Well, you know what happens when the state is involved in all of that stuff? There's shortages.
Yeah,
There's shortages.
that's right.
So
That's why I used that. Because
we have
we all saw the footage from
Yeah.
the fall of the Soviet,
right.
USSR, and the bare shelves and everything. Well, that's what they want energy-wise, is bare shelves for everybody.
Yeah, and even in our own country, we can look to California to see that we have blackouts and brownouts, and when there's high heat in the summer, heat waves causes blackouts and brownouts. And you have EVs now, and the governor's saying, well, don't charge your EV because we don't have the electricity supply. So what does that do? It's gonna grind the economy to a halt.
Yeah.
How does that provide for prosperity for your citizens? So I know we do talk a lot of common sense here on the show, and for some in the legislature that's forbidden. We can't talk common sense. We need
That's
to talk
why we
about
have to press it on the moral grounds.
Yeah,
It is absolutely immoral, and it should not be countenanced anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
So and I think with what's going on in more of recent history becoming in this 24-hour news cycle where something happens around the world. Look, Mount Etna apparently started erupting again, spewing all kinds of volcanic ash and stuff into the atmosphere. What did that do to the climate, climate change, global warming narrative? What did it do? It just totally all of the gains that we may or may not have made this year are gone.
Mm-hmm.
What are we supposed to do about that? Shall we put a gigantic catalytic converter on Mount Etna? I don't think that'll work. So we unfortunately, too many legislators look at the problems of our state through with tunnel vision, and because we're forced to look at these problems with tunnel vision, we're not coming up with reasonable solutions. If it sounds good, we want to run toward that instead of going with what works. What we know works. And that's a big problem when we are in a state where our economy is in desperate need of a jump start. We have a lack of a labor force, trades. We have a severe home shortage and lack of the adequate number of new homes. Mm-hmm. So this energy thing is one of the main pieces of the puzzle. But if we don't address the whole puzzle, I don't think we fix our economy in this state. So I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add to it. But
well, I don't want to end on a negative note.
No.
I think, the longer it continues, the more people will see the truth. And again, the more the sense of moral indignation will become palpable, that there won't be any rock to hide under for those who continue to push this or to resist opening up to other sources of energy, because people have to live.
Well, yes. And I think because of what you just said, there are a lot of more people who will be awakened, and they will, in the next election cycle, come out like they did the last election cycle, because they will see that, especially in this state, that the majority has still not heard their voice.
Yeah, it's time for the fathers of Vermont to provide and protect for the well-being of those under their care.
I
see what you're doing in the legislature as an extension of that fatherly instinct. I applaud you. I thank you for it. And don't be weary in well-doing. In due season you will reap if you don't lose heart.
No, I don't think I will. There are days that there are ups and days that there are downs, but there are a lot of good people out there. There are a lot of good people who are willing to serve. There are a lot of good people who are serving. So, I agree with you. Yeah. We definitely have a bright future. It's a matter of cracking it open and letting everybody see it. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have burned through another 1 hour show of Right Side Up. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, stay safe, stay informed, listen to Right Side Up.
I don't want your cold iron shackles around my legs.